What is up, NFL fans? Welcome back to another episode of the NFL Whip Around. I'm Jeff Hartman, joined by Coach KT Smith. But a quick call to action. If you are watching this on YouTube, like and subscribe to the channel. We do appreciate it. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. Leave us a good comment. It really does help, and we do appreciate it. But Coach, welcome to another Whip Around. How's it going?
Going great. Going to get some schedule news in a day or two,
Yes.
and that kind of feels like it'll get rolling after that.
Do you like that? Like, do you like what the NFL has done with the schedule? Like, it's become an event. I mean, everything is an event with the NFL. They're really like leaking this stuff now. And we'll talk about the upcoming game with Baltimore and Kansas City. It's going to kick off the season. But do you like how they're doing this, or do you think it's a little bit too much pomp and circumstance?
I won't watch any of it. I don't care about the pomp and circumstance. Just give me the schedule, right? Let me see it.
Exactly.
And, I don't need to see 14 different programs about it specifically, but I like how obviously the NFL continues to stay relevant. A lot of people will watch it. They're masterful in terms of their marketing.
They are. And I will say to everyone out there listening to this podcast, beware especially on Twitter or X, the leak accounts that leak weeks of games and stuff. There's already being some said about the Steelers, and you just let's wait till Wednesday. You'll get the schedule and you'll be fine. But let's talk about the schedule, because on Monday morning, the NFL made the announcement, the opening week 1 game, the Kansas City Chiefs are going to be dropping a banner at Arrowhead Stadium, and they're going to be welcoming. They could have had a bunch of different teams. They chose the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson going to Arrowhead, a rematch of the AFC Championship game last year. What were your thoughts when you saw that news?
That's a tough matchup for Kansas City. You're going to drop the banner at home. I think they would have. You don't want a cupcake. The NFL's never going to give you a cupcake because they want a competitive game, but that's going to be a tough matchup. When you look at the AFC Championship game, Baltimore was the favorite at home. Kansas City came in there and really stifled that offense. And if you're Todd Monken and his crew, then you've had a long off season to really sort of break that down and try to figure out what went wrong in that game. Why didn't the offense click? And so you got to believe that Baltimore's going to come into that game with a really good plan and a chip on their shoulder. So that'll be a tough one. Kansas City lost the previous year to Detroit, got upset at home as they dropped another banner, in that one. So it's 2 years in a row now that they're going to get a tough ask. Obviously, everybody comes for you when you're the champ, but stylistically, this will be difficult.
The early spread is just a standard 3-point home spread to the Kansas City Chiefs, and I found that very interesting. I do want to think about the Ravens a little bit. The AFC North is obviously very near and dear to our heart as Steeler fans. The Ravens have lost a lot, and they've lost a lot of coaches. And that's intriguing to me because, the talent on the team hasn't changed too much. Patrick Queen is now a member of the Steelers. We know that. But what's your take on if a coaching staff gets kind of dismantled? How easy is that to replace?
It's not easy. I mean, I obviously at a very different level, the high school level, but I've just gone through it where 2 coaches, one who was with me from when I got the head coaching job, and another who was our offense coordinator for 8 years, both left. And you go through a process where you're trying to identify people who fit what you want to do. And so if you're John Harbaugh, the nice thing about Baltimore is they've got an identity. They've got a good culture there. They've got a stable front office. It's not like one of these franchises that seems to turn over every couple of years. And so it's probably a little bit easier for Harbaugh to identify the types of coaches that he wants to fit there. So I think Baltimore's in a little bit better shape. Mike McDonald did a great job there. Losing him is a big loss. And so that'll be, as you remake the Baltimore defense a little bit on the fly there, it'll be interesting to see how seamlessly they can integrate the new staff.
It kind of sounds to me like you're leaning Baltimore in week 1 at Kansas City. Is that accurate?
I'm not leaning Baltimore because Kansas City is Kansas City. I just feel like it's a tough matchup for them.
For sure.
Grudge match kind of game against the Ravens team that's obviously very good and has had a lot of time to prepare for that game. And I mean, Kansas City's got new pieces as well, right? I mean, we talk about their offense and the speed that they've added. And it felt like if you were going to get the Chiefs, it felt like, hey, last year was the year to get the Chiefs because they didn't seem to be as explosive as they'd been in previous years, and they still won the darn Super Bowl. So they're obviously still the team to beat, I think. So it'll be a fascinating matchup there.
All right, let's go to our next topic. The full schedule, as we stated earlier, is going to be released on Wednesday. 8 p.m. Eastern time is when the NFL is going to unveil it. As I guess they're going to do like a whole hour, 2-hour schedule release thing, but everyone will get to digest their own fans' favorite team's schedule. But give me a couple games that'll be on the schedule somewhere that you're looking forward to seeing.
Yeah. So I was just kind of poking around at, we know who a lot of the team's opponents are going to be. We just don't know the order. I was just poking around at some teams that I'm interested in. I always like watching San Francisco. I like their style of play. I always like looking at what Kyle Shanahan does with his offense. And they've got to go to Green Bay this year. And I'm really hoping that in the schedule, that's late. I'm really hoping that's like a December game. Mm-hmm. You just feel like December, Lambeau Field, San Francisco coming into Green Bay. That'd be a great game. I'm always interested in matchups. You know, what are the really good matchups that you get? I think the Jets are a team that I think are going to be, if a big caveat here, if Aaron Rodgers stays healthy. But I think the Jets are going to be a team that really could put some things together. I think Jets fans have been hoping to hear that forever, and it never seems to happen. So I'm interested in, can they go into Buffalo? That'll be another one that'll be really interesting to me. Will it be a late season matchup? Can the Jets go up to Buffalo, maybe in cold weather, and win there? For me, that would say a lot about where they are as a team. As Steeler fans, you and I obviously have lots of interest. You always circle the Ravens games. I'm kind of selfishly sort of hoping for a soft opening for the Steelers, right? Like maybe give us the Giants at home. I know they play the Giants this year, right? Hey, that'd be a nice, something that they got a lot of new pieces in Pittsburgh, something to get them off to a quick start.
Rumor is that I saw online, take it for what it's worth. I just said, beware of the leaks. The rumor is that the Steelers could be on the road at Atlanta in week 1. What would you think about that?
That would be interesting, right? Arthur Smith.
Is that soft enough for you with Kirk Cousins and the Atlanta Falcons?
That'd be really interesting. 2 teams breaking in, new quarterbacks, new coordinators, a new head coach in Atlanta's situation. So that would be, that's certainly a reasonable and winnable game. I mean, Pittsburgh won in Atlanta the last time they were there. So that would be an interesting matchup for sure. There'd be a lot of national interest in that game. Russell Wilson, presuming Russell Wilson is the starter versus Kirk Cousins in their new homes. That would be an interesting game for sure.
I think that, the division rivalries are the division rivalries. Everyone's going to look for, like you said, Steelers, Ravens. You talk about the NFC East. You could go a million different directions, Cowboys, Eagles. I tend to lean towards nostalgia. Like you brought up San Francisco, Green Bay. There's a lot of great memories of great games between those two franchises. The Steelers play the Cowboys this year. I always like seeing the Steelers and Cowboys play one another. It typically is just a one-off because it's not a divisional rivalry, but there's so much history between those two organizations. And I just love the fact that a lot of these teams, you have these matchups that are never going to go away the way that the structure of the schedule is. So you have the Kansas Cities and Buffaloes playing every year at some point. Now you throw Detroit into the mix. You're going to have Detroit and San Francisco playing this year. You're going to have Detroit and who won the NFC East actually last year? It wasn't Philly. It was actually Dallas, wasn't it?
I thought Philly won the East, but you might no, you're right. Dallas won.
So Detroit's going to be playing those guys. Those are great matchups. Those are great matchups. I love to see it. So I'm actually excited for a lot of different things in this schedule. But is there a day though? Because I know for me, I always look at a couple days. Are there any days that you look for specifically on the schedule, whether it's a holiday or anything else that you always look for when you get the schedule?
I always look at Christmas and I'm like, please don't play the Steelers on Christmas, right?
Same way.
Yeah. Well, for you and I now, that's a work day,
it is.
There's a lot to do that day. And
are you okay with Thanksgiving though? If they put the Steelers on Thanksgiving, you're cool with Thanksgiving, but not on Christmas, or is it both?
I'm okay with Thanksgiving. I am because that, not to get into my whole family history, but we host Thanksgiving at our house. Everybody comes to us So I'm not traveling, and it's easy. When everybody leaves, I can kind of, go upstairs and do what I got to do, as opposed to Christmas. Sometimes we're overnight. Sometimes that's just, just logistically that's difficult. What week I'm always interested in? I'm always interested in week 2. There's all this fanfare and buildup about the opener, and everybody gets excited about the opener, and you're all geeked up about that. But week 2 is such a pivotal week for the teams who lost in week 1. Because if you get off to an 0-2 start, historically, the odds of you making the playoffs diminish tremendously from just losing your opener. And so for the teams that lose in week 1, that's a big rebound week. And I always try to look at what's the week 2 schedule look like? Because, hey, maybe a good team, maybe a team you think is going to be pretty good, like a Baltimore, goes out to Kansas City and loses in week 1. Who do the Ravens have week 2? That's going to be a big deal then for them to rebound. So I like the week 2 matchups.
I agree with the week 2. I will also add in the first thing I look for, even before the holidays, is when is the bye week? I've always, as long as I can remember, when it used to be that it just was kind of put in the newspaper, and that's how you found out the schedule, is you just looked at, they released the Steelers schedule. Here it is in the newspaper. I'd always say, when's the bye week? And I got this from my dad. He always would complain, they're screwing us with the bye week again. Here we go. We got a week 6 bye week. That's what I do. But I also look at week 18. There's always the division rivalry game in week 18. A lot of times the NFL will put together who they think is going to be a really important game as it pertains to playoff seedings and stuff. Last year, for instance, the Pittsburgh Steelers were paired up against the Ravens in week 18. So I'm always curious to see who they have in that final week of the regular season. Any other thoughts about the schedule, Coach?
No, I think that the schedule's obviously become an event in the NFL, and it'll be really interesting to see what happens with Vegas, because we're going to talk about Vegas odds in a minute here, but they always move after the schedule gets released, and I always think that that's interesting, because you look at what are the bookmakers looking at, right? They're looking at the little things, the trends in the schedule, how many miles teams have to travel, how much airtime, and how and who do you get the week after you play on a Monday night, and little things like that. Those are intriguing things that always wind up moving the line a little bit. So I always like how Vegas goes to work once they see the schedule.
Yeah, the minutia is going to be interesting to talk about after Wednesday. But let's go to our third topic. The NFL teams are in the process of holding their rookie mini camps. Some have already wrapped those up, where the reviews of the new players are almost always glowing. Chicago coaches described Caleb Williams as super competitive, while in Atlanta, Michael Penix was referred to as awesome. In New England, though, new head coach Jared Mayo had this to say about Drake May. Quote, he has a lot to work on. What do you make of these comments? Is there something to take away from Mayo choosing not to gush over May, or is this just basically meaningless football in shorts? What's your take, Coach?
It's probably meaningless, because I'm sure that it was part of a broader context of comments that he made. But it's a couple of things about it. One, strikes me as very New England. This is, Jared Mayo played for Bill Belichick. And this feels very much like a Bill Belichick thing, that, something that he would say, button down, to the point, matter of fact, not going to throw out a whole bunch of hyperbole, any of that stuff. Also, I thought it was refreshing, because it's true. It's true about all these guys. Every single guy in a mini camp right now has a lot to work on in order to get acclimated to the NFL game. And that's probably a fair assessment. And, Drake May's going to have to go there and compete with Jacoby Brissett for the starting job, at least in his first season. And I don't think it does Drake May any good for the coaching staff to be gushing and throwing out all these superlatives about him, and then be like, oh, and by the way, you didn't beat out Jacoby Brissett.
Yeah.
So you want to be encouraging, obviously. It would be discouraging if Jared Mayo was like, this guy sucks, but obviously he's not going to say that. But I thought it was refreshingly candid.
Yeah, I think the situation matters. It's important that you brought that up. You brought it up. Jacoby Brissett could start, and that's why last week I said that I like his situation. Drake Mays, he doesn't have to be playing right away from the get-go. If he earns it, that's one thing. Caleb Williams is the guy in Chicago. They got rid of Justin Fields, so he is the guy. And so when you look at it in that perspective, when Caleb Williams is dubbed as super competitive, whatever that means, and then Michael Penix, you have to say he was awesome, because everyone is making you the butt of the joke when they're talking about the NFL draft and the reaches and stuff. I get it. The situation matters. To talk about the team that we cover the closest, which is the Pittsburgh Steelers, there is a reason why Mike Tomlin never talks glowingly about rookies. If he says a positive thing about a rookie, take note, holy cow, this guy's going to be a player, because really he never does. He's always very slow to, I guess you would say, gush over a rookie. He's more, let's pump the brakes. These guys have a lot to learn. And even if it's preseason success, let's wait until the big boys get out there and they prove it against a good competition. So I agree with you. I think Mayo, he's a former player. He's seen it. He's lived it. I think that his comments of he has a lot to work on are not a cut on Drake May. And if anything, it's just a reality check. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And I think it's the responsible thing to do. Again, I'm not trying to make literal comparisons between high school coaching and NFL coaching, but I've seen it with ninth graders all the time. You coached in high school. These kids come in as ninth graders. They were the star in eighth grade. And it doesn't do them any good for you to get them all pumped up about you're going to be this, you're going to be that. They have so much work to do, so much maturing to do as individuals. Their bodies aren't done growing. They're adapting to new circumstances. There have been plenty of really talented ninth graders that have come through our building that just didn't make it in our program. They lack the discipline. When you're a younger kid, you get by on your talent. You're bigger and better than everybody else. When you get to high school, you got to work, and maybe they can't do that, or maybe they fall into some problems because of the family situation or something along those lines. It's just too early in the process for you to be talking about them like they're the next thing. And so you want to be encouraging. You want to obviously compliment them on things that they do well, but you got to keep that in check because you just don't know how it's going to turn out.
And let's also not forget, like, quarterback is a little different, but when you talk about those eighth graders that come into ninth grade, and I used to have some kids that were just unbelievable players in eighth grade, and they would come up to me. I taught at the middle school. Coach, I'm going to be so good next year. I'm like, you understand as a ninth grader what it's going to be like going up against a 12th grader? A senior is going to beat the crap out of you because they're literally, it's almost like an adult. And then you fast forward to the NFL, like a lineman. We talked about this before. You're going up against a grown ass man, and you might be this young tackle, guard, whatever, and you think, I got this. No, you don't. They have all the tricks. They know exactly how to get away with stuff. And next thing you know, your face is in the dirt and you're wondering what the hell happened. As Cam Hayward just bull rushed you into another century. So I think that's important to note. The rookies have a lot to work on. And I understand why the other two organizations did what they did. We'll make that very clear. All right, let's go to the fourth thing. We talked about the odds a little bit earlier with Vegas and these sports books. FanDuel Sportsbooks are giving the San Francisco 49ers the best odds to win Super Bowl 59, followed by the Chiefs and the Ravens. If you had to wager money on a team other than those three to hoist the Lombardi next February, who would it be and why? Coach, who you got?
Tempting to talk about the Lions here.
Yeah, I thought about
it. They've obviously improved significantly, and there's great buzz around Dan Campbell, and they had a good off season. But if I'm taking money on a longer shot, I don't want to say a long shot. It's not like we're laying money here on the Falcons or anything like that, but a longer shot, I would be willing to lay some money on the Jets because they have remade their roster significantly. They're talented at just about every position. When you look at the Jets roster and you look at their depth chart, you're like, damn, that's a good football team. And it all hinges on Rodgers. And I'd be willing to lay down. I don't know what the odds are on the Jets, but I'd put 50 down, 50 or 100. Yeah.
Plus 2,700 for the New York.
Plus 2,700. Yeah. Hell yeah. I'd lay 50 on that in a heartbeat, right?
Yeah, you don't have to put that much to win some money if they win the Super Bowl. You're right.
No. And you say to yourself, they got a really talented roster, and maybe Aaron Rodgers has got one more Aaron Rodgers season in him. Now, they're a long shot for a reason. The odds are that's not going to happen. But I mean, if we're in this situation and it's like, hey, man, put some money on a team that's not the favorite, I would not hesitate to do that with the Jets.
To give people specifics out there, and this is not Pez's picks, the podcast I do with our buddy Pez and his picks. The difference between San Francisco and Kansas City is slim. San Francisco, according to FanDuel, is plus 550. Kansas City's plus 600. So they are like 1A and 1B. Baltimore's plus 950. Cincinnati comes in at plus 1300. Detroit, the same. Buffalo, the same. The team that I would take at plus 1400, give me the Philadelphia Eagles. There is no reason in my mind that team should have fallen flat on their faces like they did last year. And no one knows. No one knows why. You are inundated with Philadelphia fans, and they're all asking the same questions. Does anyone have an answer that you've heard of, whether it's sports talk radio or anything, as to what happened with Philly last year?
No, they don't. I mean, the things that people tend to believe are that it had something to do with locker room chemistry and Hurts and Sirianni being sort of separate from the rest of the team, and but okay, fine, I get that. But by the end of the year, they just look like a disinterested football team that really, and that's not, there's something there that if they've been able to fix it from a chemistry standpoint, they are as talented as anybody in the league. No doubt about it.
All right. Let me give you a couple teams, give you a couple odds, and tell me if you would put the money on them. Interestingly, I thought the odds would be longer for this team, but they're not. Houston Texans plus 1,600. What do you think?
I mean, I think Houston's good and they've done some really good things. I don't know if they're ready to be able to win at that level yet. So I'm going to say no.
What's shocking is that then the Miami Dolphins are plus 2,300. Do you think the Dolphins could get over the hump?
I kind of put them in the same. What happened with them in the playoffs last year to me was a big red flag. So unless they can get home field advantage or can play the AFC Championship on the road in a warm weather climate, they got to go to Buffalo, Baltimore, Cincinnati, Kansas City, any of those places. I think they're going to struggle.
Now, I'm not even going to go down the road of why Cleveland has better odds than Pittsburgh. We're not even going to talk about that. But if you had to pick one of these two teams at plus 5,000 to win the Super Bowl, which are you taking? The LA Chargers or the Pittsburgh Steelers?
The Pittsburgh Steelers, Jeff. Come on,
but
man.
no, I mean, yeah, as a fan, but as the coach, as the guy talking on the NFL feed, like the Chargers, new head coach, they still have a great quarterback. They just had a really good draft, got a lockdown tackle in Joe Alt. So do you think the Steelers have a better chance than the LA Chargers this year?
Yes, not in year one with Harbaugh. I mean, that he's got to get back into the NFL. He's got to get reacclimated. I mean, I think he's a great coach. But they're really remaking their whole identity in LA. And we got to see if that jives with what Justin Herbert's most comfortable with. Give him a year before I'm willing to, kind of go there.
Got it. The worst odds, the Carolina Panthers plus 30,000.
I didn't even know you could get plus 30,000.
You can. The Carolina Panthers. That's going to be interesting. And like you said earlier, these lines will change. These lines will definitely change. All right, let's go to the fifth and final topic here before we get to our player profile, which I'm switching it on Coach in show. He doesn't even know this. We'll get to that in a second. Former official John Perry, who for the past few seasons has been an analyst for ESPN, left the network to take a job as a quote-unquote officiating liaison, whatever that means, with a still unnamed NFL team. What's your take on this situation? Is it a savvy move by a team trying to gain an advantage, or is it just that it's gotten too complex and officials are too involved? What's your take on this situation? I saw this, was interested what you thought.
Yeah. Well, I know you love talking about officials, so I'll be interested to hear what you say. I mean, I think it's both. I think it's a smart move. The interpretation of the rules has become a big matter of talking points in the NFL right now. It's one where I don't even think all the officials know exactly what the interpretations of the rules are. If you can have a guy on the inside who maybe can give you some better insight on these types of things, can advise you on some things about replay challenges or about how, like, for example, we now have a ban on the hip drop tackle. And maybe now you got a guy that can give you a little bit more clarity as to what that means exactly and how you might have to reshape your tackling. I think that's a wise move. But isn't it also kind of a sad commentary on the sport right now that you actually need to hire a guy to help you explain the damn rules? That just feels sad to me.
No, it is. It is. And honestly, I think that outside of being an official on the field, there is no worse job than being a rules analyst for television. Because let's go over how this works. You are not employed by the league. You're reading the rules secondhand, just like all of us are. You're not there for the interpretations. You can talk to people. I'm sure you have connections, but still, what happens is now all of a sudden there has to be an interpretation in game. And so they bring in John Perry. All right, John, what do you think about this one? Well, I don't know. To me, that looks like this, this, and this. Totally wrong. And then you're like, well, what is John Perry getting paid for? To get it wrong? I could do that. It's like a weatherman. So
Right.
for me, I just think that also for his own personal career, he might look at this and say, I can go help out this team. They're going to ask me any questions that they want. What do we think about the interpretations of this rule? I would be at practice. I could literally be the official at every single practice. That's a hell of a lot easier than it is the liaison for ESPN, CBS, Fox, any other entity that requires such a thing. So for me, I don't blame these guys. The league, we've talked about this seeming like an unbelievable amount of times. The league clearly doesn't care that much. They've done nothing to really change anything. Roger Goodell says, well, we know we need some full-time officials. Then do it already. Like, if you really cared, you would have done it. They haven't done it. They don't care. They don't care. I think they like the fact that we talk about the officiating because we're talking about the product. We're talking about the NFL. Bad publicity is still publicity, right, Coach?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it feels as though the league doesn't believe that they have a problem with the officiating.
Yeah.
Because like you just said, if they did, I would assume that they would do something about it. And it's one of those things where as a fan, you watch the games and you say to yourself, this is interrupting. All of this officiating, all of these conferences and this analysis, it's detracting from the product. And now teams are hiring officials as consultants to help them navigate that whole process. Like how that doesn't scream out like we need to do something to fix this. It is I don't know how they don't see it, but maybe they just don't know what the answer is. I mean, it might be that the league is like, we don't know really how to fix it. We're going to try to err on player safety, and if that means taking away hits to the head or hip drop tackles or defenseless receivers, we're going to do that. And we're going to live with the fact that it may muddy up the product on the field or create some controversy because at the end, it's going to grow the game.
The league has always been a knee-jerk league as it pertains to how they handle officiating. Think back to the LA Rams and the Saints and the pass interference, the non-call, which equated in the Saints not going to the Super Bowl. And everyone freaked out. And what happened the next year? Knee-jerk reaction. Now you can challenge pass interference calls. It was a nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare. Only like 2 calls got overturned, one of which was against the Steelers. Not going to talk about that. But still, then all of a sudden you go to now the hip drop tackle. Mark Andrews on a primetime game gets taken down. It looks gruesome. We need to eliminate this tackle from the game, and now they have. It's just going to muddy the waters, like you said. They don't have any answers, and that's a really, really bad corner to paint yourself into, and yet they have. So we'll see how they figure this out. But yeah, it's interesting. John Perry, no longer with ESPN. Yeah. All right, let's finish up with a player profile. Coach, while we were recording, news broke that
exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Adam Schefter of ESPN, that another deal is done in Detroit. Lions are signing Jared Goff to a 4-year, $212 million contract extension that includes $170 million in guaranteed money. Goff now goes from a number 1 overall pick to the highest paid Lion in franchise history. But listen, here's the highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL on a per year basis. Joe Burrow, $55 million per year. Jared Goff, 53. Herbert, 52.5. Lamar, 52. Jalen Hurts, 51. I want to get your take. This is all about Jared Goff right now. Player profiles, Jared Goff getting the bag. What's your take on those numbers?
Well, first of all, good for Jared Goff, man.
Yeah.
This is a guy that was basically kicked to the curb by the Rams a couple of years ago. I mean, everybody thought in that trade that Stafford was the centerpiece and Goff was the guy who would go to Detroit just until the Lions could find somebody to replace him. And he was going to be the bridge quarterback to their next guy. And obviously, he's played really, really well there. He's been a much better fit in their system than he was in the McVay system out in L.A. 50-something million, though. I know you're not the biggest Jared Goff fan. What do you think about that contract?
That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. I feel like what's happening now is that, again, a lot of teams in the league is knee jerk. So you have a situation where, well, we know we don't have the best guy, which is Patrick Mahomes. I don't think anyone's going to argue that, but we have a guy, and having a guy is better than the guy. So we don't want to have no guy. So let's give our guy a little bit of money. I'm shocked he got this much. I don't blame him. Good for him. But I don't think Jared Goff is the guy, but he proved a lot to me last year. I'll say that, because last year at this time I was like, Jared Goff stinks. He's not going to be in Detroit very long. He proved a lot to me down the stretch and the way he played in the playoffs. I don't think the reason they lost was because of him. So good for him. But the Detroit Lions, they're looking like they're a win now team, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're gonna pay that money to your quarterback, you better be. That's franchise quarterback money, and when you pay that franchise quarterback that money, you expect to compete for a championship. And so, Detroit's in that conversation for sure. And they're a team. Man, they had the NFC Championship game won last year. I mean, we could be talking about Detroit like as the Super Bowl champ. That's not a far-fetched thing to say, considering they beat Kansas City last year. So who knows if they made it to the Super Bowl. And if you're a Super Bowl winning quarterback, then you command top dollar. So I know I'm kind of trying to connect some dots here to get to it. It still feels like a big price tag to me, but it's not a ridiculous contract for Jared Goff, given the way he played and the position Detroit's in.
I look at these numbers and I ask myself, like, who's the next quarterback that's going to be getting a big time deal? To me, it's Brock Purdy. Like, how much is Brock Purdy how much is he going to get in terms of these numbers? Like, you look at those numbers again, Burrow's getting $55 million per year, Goff 53, Herbert 52.5, Hurts 51. Is Brock Purdy going to be in the $50 million a year? The dude's been really successful for the 49ers, but is he that guy?
That's a hard question, because the 49ers were that good with Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah.
And so when is it the system? Can you pretty much take just about anybody and plug them in? Now, obviously it didn't work with like a Trey Lance, but they had Jimmy G showed himself to be a pretty mediocre quarterback. They went to the Super Bowl with him. So is Purdy a special guy, or is it just a special system? That's a tough thing to answer.
We will see, but good for Jared Goff. Congratulations to him. $170 million guaranteed. He's going to see that money no matter what. So good for him. All right, Coach, what's your final thoughts here? And what do you have coming up on the call sheet?
Well, my final thoughts are that when the schedule is released on Wednesday, I'm going to love getting into some of the chat rooms that show up with all the fan comments about everybody freaking out, because there's always people there'll be some conspiracy talk in there.
Oh, yeah.
Why does Kansas City always get whatever it might be?
Exactly.
So that's the overreacting is always fun. Call sheet this week. I haven't really hammered out everything yet, but it's episode 56. And I'm going to spend some time talking about Lawrence Taylor, one of the more fascinating characters in NFL history. Lawrence Taylor made some news over the weekend by endorsing Donald Trump, whatever that's worth. But because that's what the world needs is retired NFL players, in their political endorsements. But Lawrence Taylor is a fascinating character on and off the field, and I've got some interesting stories, a little bit of personal, encounters with Lawrence Taylor that I can share, and it'll be fun to sort of talk about him as an NFL legend.
Well, I got to give your last week's episode a plug. If people like off the field characters, you got to go back and listen to the call sheet last week. Some of that stuff that you were telling about, what was it?
Johnny Blood McNally. Yeah.
I'm listening to it while folding laundry in my bedroom. I'm like, this isn't true. He's making this up. Like, there's no way this guy's done all this stuff. Go check it out on the FFSN NFL podcast feed. It's still good. It's a good stuff as always. Coach, thank you very much for your time. Until next week, take it easy.